Mindset makes it really interesting because, like, the conversation that you and I are having, the way that we're breaking it down, two people that are sitting side by side each other could have a different perspective and an intake depending on what they're going through in their life, and how whatever point that they're out is going to be how they perceive what we just said.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here live with the one and only Kat Polsinelli. Katherine, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much, Oliver.
It's honestly such a pleasure to have you on the show. We've been kind of like going back and forth for a little while trying to make this happen, but our schedules not permitting, whatever it may be. But we finally made it here. I'm so psyched to go. And one of the things that we kind of spoke about was on a number of occasions was like mindset and kind of the role it plays. And I know that it's a very prominent, or I should say predominant struggle. Hopefully not always a struggle, but it's something that is definitely very predominant in the real estate industry. And it's something that you're kind of a specialist at, if I'm not being too presumptuous by saying that. So before we get into that and mindset and what it does in real estate, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, as far as mindset and things like that, it's actually been a huge piece of what I've been throughout my life. And I went through some dark times. But to give you a little bit of the backstory, so I was a single mom for most of my children's lives. Met my husband about 3 years ago. Been in and out of the corporate before I got into real estate. Decided to take a leap and try the entrepreneurship. Fell in love with it, and then I took a position for one of the largest companies, real estate companies in the world. I actually worked as their agent services coordinator. So I dealt with over 250 agents at any given time within their agency, whether it was helping with tech setup or teaching classes or whatever the case may be. And what I realized was I actually loved doing that even more than selling houses, which is how agent services became a whole thing of growing and building this business, was so that I could reach out and help other people in their businesses and help them grow, because I got more gratitude out of that.
There's kind of a lot to unpack there, really. I guess it's kind of making sense why mindset is something that you specialize in, like being as a single mom and an entrepreneur. Like neither of those two things are easy tasks, and especially if you put them together, I'm assuming that there's so much at least perceived volatility or whatever it is in both of those things. Like, how did you kind of not only manage with those things but thrive through both of those? I don't want to call them obstacles, but let's say challenging scenarios that you found yourself in?
I would say that it wasn't always fun. It wasn't always easy. I think the biggest thing for me is you have to have some type of push in anything that you do. And in the entrepreneurial world, right, you have to have goals and ambitions and things like that. For me, at the time of making the switch of being an entrepreneur and being a single mom, it was really my kids. It was being able to be there for them, being able to attend their school functions or when they were playing sports or whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, due to the situation that my children and I came out of, I wanted them to see that no matter what you go through, you always have the advantage to be whatever it is that you want, and nothing in your past and nothing you've gone through can stop you from that. So that was a huge part of the continuing for me.
It's interesting, though. Right now, it sounds like it was always within you. And like, this might sound like an obvious thing, and I am like kind of like leading into this mindset thing, but it does seem like that's sort of how you got through it. Meaning, I would say that circumstances are not ideal. And so I've heard it time and time again. It's like, I couldn't, like, it was hard. There was too many things going against me. When will life give me a break?
Mm-hmm.
But you never said that. And I don't know that you never said that, but I mean, you didn't, because at the end of the day, you pushed through. So do you think that it was kind of like anyone really has the potential and the capacity to be successful and to thrive regardless? They just don't have the push, or they don't have the mindset to make that happen? Or do you think that it is something that you just managed to do because you have some kind of makeup that other people don't have?
I would definitely agree with the first one. So I do feel like it is something that's within all of us. I do think that, unfortunately, for a lot of us, going through some type of trauma ends up being something that kind of makes your mind a little bit stronger and the ability to push through things a little bit easier. And that's not saying that people that haven't had that you should be going through that. But yeah, I do feel like that we we really do have that inside of us. The biggest issue among everyone is limiting beliefs, right? Same thing that I went through, that I continue to go through. It's just how you handle those limiting beliefs and whether you allow them to make your life or you use them as a lessons to build into your life.
Right. That's interesting. So what I kind of like about the idea of hard work and hustle is it's the great equalizer, right? Like, honestly, I think one of the challenges, at least personally in my business, is that I sometimes I can overcomplicate things. And at the end of the day, usually the road to success, it's a very straight and simple road. It's just, are you going to get up and do it?
Yeah.
And kind of like you said, like I could identify things that have happened in my life or moments in my life where I was like, I got to pull my socks up. Like I gotta just do it,
Mm-hmm.
and it sometimes takes months to get to that point where you realize like, hey, there's no way out of this except for just like push forward.
Yeah.
Right. So what would you say is, and this is kind of an open question, so you can take this however you see fit, but what would you say is like the role of mindset in real estate?
Oh, well, it's in a lot of things. It's in how you start your business and where your push comes from, or how much you try new things. It can be a part of how you grow your business. It can be the niche within your business, right? In my personal opinion, in the world of real estate or any entrepreneurial role, you have to have your own push, and you also have to be the one to be your own cheerleader, right? And we hear this a lot when you get into real estate. Yes, we all hope that you have a brokerage that is communicating with you, that's supporting you, but for a lot of us that isn't the case, or it's not the kind of support that we need. And so you have to have that mentality to help push through every one of those barriers, right? Like not knowing how to conversation. You can use that as, a way to hold you back and be like, oh, there's no way I can talk to this person. Or you push through it and you give yourself that confidence of, it's okay not to know everything, but I can learn and I can still talk to my clients and they're going to trust me because of who I am. Like, in my opinion, mindset is a huge piece in the real estate industry for starting to growing to getting to where you want to be.
So would you say that it's almost like nature, that people find inadequacies in themselves and basically use that as the reason that they can't do something, and then it's nurture to be like, even though I'm, let's say, quote unquote, deficient in this aspect, I still have to basically find a way to make it through that or to succeed despite that? Like, how would you kind of break that down?
Yeah, so it's definitely a way to nurture yourself. So a lot of us have, that voice in our head, right? And basically what a lot of people attribute that to is your ego, and your ego likes to keep you safe. So in working with that ego, you can do one of two things. You can hate that ego, which is just going to frustrate you and kind of keep you stuck, or you can learn to work with that ego and give them a safe space. So nurturing yourself and having that conversation with yourself of it's okay. Everybody that does, real estate or anything, didn't know it in the beginning, right? When you got your first job, you didn't know what on earth you were doing. Someone had to train you. It's the same thing in the real estate world. So taking those thoughts that you get, and instead of letting them overrun, stopping and assessing what it is that's going through your mind and having that conversation with yourself of like, okay, why do I feel this way, right? Or why do I feel like I need to know everything? Or why do I feel like I can't be trained in order to be in real estate? Having those conversations actually allows the body to kind of let go a little bit. It doesn't necessarily destroy the ego. You're always going to have that piece behind you that's kind of wondering if it's safe to go where you're going when you get to the next step. And when you get to the next step, right, you'll hear a lot of people that are huge in the industry that still talk about that. So it's just learning to live with it and give it its own space and let it know that it's okay to have those thoughts, but this is what we're going to do to continue moving forward.
Right. So basically accept and embrace your deficiencies. And again, I use the word deficiencies, and because no one's good at everything.
Correct.
Right? And I almost like, there's a couple of things that really, when you look at something objectively, make such perfect sense, but it's so hard to see it in the moment. Like, for example, like I love to play basketball. If some guy, let's say I want to teach him how to play basketball, and he's like, I can't because I need to get myself a shooting sleeve. When I get a shooting sleeve, we're good to go. And then I get a shooting sleeve, it's like, well, my shoes are like 2 years old now. I want to get like some proper shoes. When I get that, then it's like, when it's something as trivial as basketball, it's very obvious to be like, dude, just go in a t-shirt and shorts and like wear your loafers, for heaven's sake. You're just working on your jump shot. You'll be okay.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It makes sense when it's something that's so trivial. But in the moment, when you're in real estate and it's like, I can't call these people because I need to get a CRM that's absolutely perfect. And then when I have that, like I need to leave with the absolute most amount of value. Like it's fine. Like in your loafers, right? Worst case scenario, you slip a little bit when you're taking a shot, you'll be okay. Like I'm obviously, God forbid, you could break your ankle. So if you do go and you're wearing the wrong shoes, like just a full disclaimer, but um, I think in real estate, I don't think you're gonna, and analogically speaking, be breaking your ankle if you go not 150,000% prepared. Like you'll be okay. And the other
Yeah.
example that I like to give as well, and I really love what you mentioned about the cheerleader, that like you got to be your own cheerleader at the beginning, because the people who are starting out, to be honest, are working infinitely harder than the people that are already successful. And even if that's not, let's say, quantifiably true, even if the person who's successful is working for, let's say, 17 hours a day, which I would hope not, but let's say they're doing that and the new agent is working for 4 hours a day, the emotional strain of that newer agent that doesn't know if they're going to succeed versus the agent that's already doing it and they know X equals Y in terms of input and output, it's much easier for them to actually do that effort, right? To put in that effort. So one of the things that I also like to talk about is like, imagine you're reading a book. Like if you're reading and you're like on page 40 and it's a 300-page book, and like, let's say a character, I don't know, starts going through some serious problems, or let's say like someone's, I don't know, sibling dies in the book, you just keep reading because it's not the end of the book.
True.
And you know that because you just, even if you don't know what's inside of it, you just look at the book and you see that they've still got another 260 pages left. We don't have that kind of luxury in life. But even though we actually do, because if someone's like 30 years old, it's like, you could look at that and be like, I still got another like 50, 60, 70, whatever it is, years to go.
Yeah.
Would you say that those kinds of ways of looking at it are all around mindset, perspective? How would you kind of categorize that?
I would say it's a little bit of both. And mindset makes it really interesting because, like, the conversation that you and I are having, the way that we're breaking it down, the two people that are sitting side by side each other could have a different perspective and an intake depending on what they're going through in their life, and how whatever point that they're out is going to be how they perceive what we just said, right? Some person might take it and be like, oh, that means I just need to go ahead and do everything. The other person might take it as like, okay, well, I can at least let go of like this and start working on that, right? So I do feel like mindset and perspective kind of wrap into each other. And then the reason being is because everybody has a different perspective and everyone's going to have a slightly different intake on that mindset and when you're having that conversation. But I do think that it's very important, like you were saying, to use analogies like that that allow you to kind of see the bigger picture, because we do get stuck in what's right in front of us. And then we get so overwhelmed that we literally freeze. And so there is no way to move forward, right? And so sometimes looking at all the things that you have to do and saying, okay, what is one thing that I know I can focus on? And if I at least do that, I know I'm moving forward, right? And that may be working on your scripts, or that may be, doing so many calls a day to at least get yourself in the habit. Believe it or not, but having that small bit of confidence and pushing forward will actually help you move forward even more, because now you've proved to yourself that you can do that small thing. Oh, okay, well, that wasn't that bad. So now I can add this, right? And it starts to compound on top of each other, where you start to build that confidence within yourself of knowing like, okay, well, I did this and I did this and it wasn't that bad. So I can do this too.
Where would you say, like, why is it such a struggle for people to step back and look at something objectively or see the big picture? It's something that's so hard for people to do.
It really is. And to be honest, I think it's a lot of what we have in front of our face constantly. We have social media, we have the news, we have all these crap things, right? Or people that are talking about other people, or people that, if you're on real estate groups, that are like, oh, it's so horrible and this is so bad, right? And so we easily get sucked into that negativity. We get sucked into that small thinking. And it is so much easier for us to stay in that small space because the ego is safe. And the ego knows that as long as you keep doing what we already know we can do, and you don't go outside of that, we're safe. So if you'll just stay right here, we'll be okay. So it does take that moment of really telling yourself that it's going to be okay no matter what, because I am that kind of person. Looking back at things that you've been through, whether it's small things, big things, whatever
Right.
the case may be, if you look through the troubles that you've been through and you're like, okay, well, I made it through that, then why can't you apply the same thing moving forward? And so it's teaching yourself to have that kind of perspective, to push out the negative, get off social media and reading everybody's post, right? I scroll through a ton of things. If somebody's looking for help, I always want to answer. But if you're complaining right off the rip, I scroll right by it.
Right.
Because it's what you put into your brain and what you are intaking every day that you're going to output.
Would you say then that if we put somebody from, let's say, 150 years ago into today's day and age and basically made them a real estate agent, caught them up to speed in technology and everything like that instant gratification maybe wasn't there the same way then as it is now, would you say that they would have a leg up then, looking at it from this perspective?
I would say that it's very possible. I definitely would say that I think that their thinking would be a little bit bigger than what we have, because we have so many things coming at us telling us how we can't do this, how we can't do that. Well, that person failed, right? We have all of these things that tell us why we shouldn't do something. So yeah, I do think that for a lot of people 150 years ago, right, we didn't have so much negativity that was just pounding in our face day in and day out from friends and family and the world and everything else that we were collectively in. We had that space to walk in nature, to be by ourselves, to take a breath of fresh air, because you had that time, right? Or you made that time because you didn't have your phone in front of your face to sit and scroll mindlessly through.
It's like everything is sensationalized, because it's you either get those kinds of negatives. It's almost like a central location where everybody can just go and vent and say why their life is so terrible, or it's a place where some people can go and be like, look how rich I am and look how happy I am, and man, you're nothing like me, and if you were, you'd be happy, but you're not like me, so like sucks to be you. Like that kind of dichotomy of the world that we're living in is honestly so toxic. And it's almost like, I'm kind of just thinking, it's almost like we've been domesticated almost. Like imagine you're I don't know, driving through the Rocky Mountains, and there's a sign like, don't feed the bears, because if you feed the bears, they're going to rely on humans for food and they're not going to know how to hunt for themselves. Like, we're those bears. We've been like hand fed by the forces that be, whatever it is, and now we've lost the ability to just go out and do our own hunting, right? And I feel like now that's also probably, and tell me if you disagree, but that's also probably why there's such a distinction between, because everyone's starting in the same field. Like, let's say even 200 years ago, there was no equalizer. There was no like, we're all starting from the same position and we can all accomplish this quote unquote American dream. That didn't exist. Nowadays, anybody could accomplish anything. So there really shouldn't be that large of a distinction between the ones that really make it and the ones that don't. And again, I wasn't alive 200 years ago, but I feel like the distinction is possibly even bigger now. And I may get torn up by somebody listening to this who's like a story and be like, people really, I don't know for sure, but like, I don't know. We've got everything handed to us. Like, there shouldn't be such a distinction between let's say the 1 to 10% versus the bottom 99 or 90%. But there is.
Yeah. And I think a big piece of that and the difference in that is your mindset. It really truly is. It is so much easier to talk yourself out of something for fear of failing or for fear of not doing it the perfect way. So it's a lot easier for your people to say, oh, you know what? I tried it, but it wasn't going well. So, I just decided to go back in corporate, right? It's very easy to say that because, again, your brain wants to keep you safe. And it knows that if you do this, which is what you were doing before, you were safe. So you're good, right? And so you have to challenge that mindset. You have to challenge that thinking in order to get to where you want to go. And that is the difference between those that are at the bottom and are really struggling and those that have made it, is that mindset piece and how you see yourself, or where you know that you can go, or being okay with pushing that envelope and saying, you know what, worst case scenario, if I fail, quote unquote, I learned something from it and I know next time not to do it again. You did the same thing when you were a kid. I mean, you weren't born and knew how to walk, right?
Right.
You had to start by learning to sit up, learning to balance, learning to crawl. And then you got to the point of learning how to stand and hold yourself up. It's the same thing in your business. We all start from ground zero. Some of us may have been in the entrepreneurial world, so their mindset is a little bit different. And therefore, it's a little bit easier for them to be like, it's okay, I can try this. I've done it before, right? But we all start from, like you were saying, the same spot. You're starting from the baby stages. And you do the same thing throughout your life. When you got in school, you didn't know what the heck you were doing. You had to be taught. You had to learn. You had to read. You had to take notes, right? It's the same thing in your business. The only thing is a lot of people get lost in between the two, right? Or they're like, oh, I'm going to learn all the things. And then once I perfect it,
Right.
I can move forward. So then they get stuck in that learning phase, right? That system overload, that knowledge overload, and they're not actually doing the actions. So you have to find that balance, in my personal opinion, within your business of taking time to learn and get better, learn from your mistakes and make notes of it and keep pushing forward at the same time.
So why is it that a 12-month-old baby can get up, walk, fall, get up again, walk, fall, and a 40-year-old adult can't call an expired listing?
Oh, I love that question. So, because they have not been subjected to limiting beliefs. They don't know what it is. They know that somebody is going to take care of them and somebody's going to help them, right? So for them it's just doing it again and doing it again and doing it again. We all had the same thing when we were kids. So interestingly enough, between the ages of 7 and 10 is right about the time that you really start learning limiting beliefs, and you
Right.
start intaking other people's beliefs, which is for a lot of us the reason why we don't push forward in certain things. And so, if anyone can think about this, if you have an issue with saving money, right, or spending money, were you raised in a household where money was a problem, right, or money didn't grow on trees, or it was a hard conversation, or you saw your parents struggle? Think about the things that you went through, because honestly, what we dealt with in our adolescent years is what is building us and what builds a lot of those limiting beliefs that now we have as our own. And that's something that I find is really interesting. And I had a mentor that talked to me about this one time, and she said, "Why do you keep taking the beliefs of others and making them your own as if they're true?" And we tend to do that in our world in a lot of different spaces. It's just a belief, and not every belief and not every saying that's out there is actually true. But in our minds, we internalize it, and we've internalized things since we were at that younger age. But when you're a baby and you're learning to walk, you haven't been subjected to that.
It's like there's two things going on. There's fear, and then there's also limiting beliefs, right? Like fear of danger, and obviously the flip side of that is the allure, even though that's probably not the right word. It's the as I say, the attraction to safety, and then the
Mm-hmm.
limiting beliefs as well. And I think that what's almost interesting is, again, if you just looking at biologically or like evolutionarily speaking, back in the days where we were cavemen, let's say, like it was safe for us to freaking go out and hunt saber-toothed tigers. Like that was the safest option because otherwise we die.
Yeah.
So back against the wall, like what else am I gonna do? Which is, as you were talking, kind of what I was thinking is it's like the reason possibly that sometimes you kind of only decide to take action when your back is against the wall is because there's no safety net here. Like
Yep.
me and my reflection in the mirror and what's going to happen. And when you remove that safety net, the natural biological response is, well, let me go out and hunt. Let me go and make it happen. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's also probably something that's probably why people really do succeed when their backs are against the wall, is because like it's always in you. You can make it happen. The question is, are you going to go out and do that? And when you remove the safety net, I'm not a big fan of Dan Pena, but he did say this, that like if you have like a plan A and a plan B and a plan C, your plan A is never going to work. Like
Yeah.
remove the plan B and plan C. And again, I'm not giving life advice here. Like if somebody's like, I'm working a part-time job and I want to get rid of that, because then I'm not suggesting that you do that. You got to obviously put food on the table for your family here. But there is a lot of truth to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the other element of it that you were mentioning about the limiting belief, like that for me is fascinating. Like I never really thought about it like that. Like kids don't really understand the concept of limitations. And even when they fail, like my 5-year-old daughter, when she was about 3.5 years old, she was starting to learn to ride a bike with training wheels. And we set it up that like the bike could still wobble, so she could still fall, and she did fall, but she just
Mm-hmm.
kept on getting up and kept on getting back on the bike, and it was crazy. And so even now, it's like it doesn't really fully make sense to me because she was falling, and I wasn't always there to catch her, and she
Mm-hmm.
did hurt her knee, and she did get up, but you just kept on going, and it almost defies logic in every sense of the word. Like, why would you do this? Because probably even more than the attraction to safety, she had this desire to grow and to succeed. And that desire to grow and succeed in the absence of a limiting belief can overcome fear of pain and fear of failure, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
That's just crazy to think about.
It's interesting to really think how free our minds were when we were younger, and then how over the years we've just compounded other people's things, and it just
Yeah,
weighs down on our ability to make simple decisions.
it really is. It really, really is. So, what would you say then is the biggest reason that mindset is something that's often overlooked? Like if most people when they join a coaching program, let's say, and then I know I just had Walter Key and Raymond Schultz on the podcast last week, and we were talking about their book, and the first chapter is mindset. And I'm only going to speak from what I know from talking to people, not particularly about this book, but from what I know about people is that they'd open the book, they go, okay, chapter 2, let's start. Like mindset, we're just going to skip over that one. Like mindset, yeah, you got to be successful, blah, 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 manifest in your mind, blah, blah, blah. Let's get to the real stuff. Why does that happen? Why is it so overlooked if it's so powerful?
Because mindset takes a lot more out of you, and it requires you to get to know yourself, which a lot of us do not want to do, right? We would rather hide behind our daily activities and keep ourselves busy and immerse ourselves in what our kids are doing, what our family is doing, what are my clients doing, right? It's easier for us to stay constantly busy than to slow down and listen to what's inside of our head and learn to work through that.
So what do you think they're saying at that moment, though? Because they're not saying, I don't want to do mindset because that requires introspection, which sucks. Like, what are they saying at that point?
So, interestingly enough, it's not that they're necessarily saying anything, because you have a subconscious and you have a conscious, and your conscious is that part of you that knows what you're doing, right? It's active throughout the day. You're doing things. It's what controls your habits. Your subconscious is basically like your autopilot. Okay. So your autopilot already knows what it doesn't want to work on. It already knows what it doesn't want to do, right? And what it does want to do. Like if you ever like been washing the dishes and talking to someone, you didn't even realize that you were still washing the dishes, and you're like, oh yeah, let me work on the next plate. Your subconscious takes over, and so it's an automatic habit. You don't even realize that you're doing it. So in a lot of people's minds, we already know, because we stay so busy, like not wanting to handle things, that the subconscious picks that up ultimately. So immediately when you see something in front of you that means you'd have to work on it, the subconscious is like, yeah, no, we don't need that. So it's not necessarily telling you anything, right? Or you're having a conversation with yourself. It may just be like a little hint, like, oh yeah, no, we're good. And you just move on. So you don't even realize what you just did, because you've already programmed your subconscious to not worry about growth, to not worry about dealing with that. You would rather stay in what you're doing right now or focusing on the future, because that allows you not to have to focus on everything else. And a lot of us do that. We live in a world where, because of instant gratification and things like that, we do not focus on that present moment, right? Have you ever paid attention to the thoughts that you have throughout the day? Or do you like hear them a lot of times and just kind of like blow them off and go on about your business? When you take that step back, when you hear that, oh, you probably shouldn't do this, right? Or this is not a good idea. Or if you read someone's post, you're like, I would never do that. Or I could never be that kind of person. A lot of us hear that for like a slight second and just keep on moving on.
Right.
The interesting part where you get to grow and you get to learn what's really going on is when you stop and you say, wait a minute, what did you just say?
Yeah.
The kids probably think I'm crazy because I talk to myself all the time, but it's stopping for that extra second and saying, well, why would you say that? I can do that. I would have to do X, Y, and Z. So it's challenging those small little thoughts that we have throughout the day. It's just we don't pay attention to them, but we have already programmed them into our subconscious, and they're constantly there. But because we are not taught to be in that present moment, to listen to that and to take those moments, we're taught to stay busy, right? You got to work hard 24/7. You need to do this. You need to stay busy. If you're not doing this, you're not doing enough. But what it's doing is it's actually keeping us from learning about ourselves. It's keeping us from having those conversations, and it's keeping us from living in the present moment to start deciphering where we actually want to go and why we are really being held back.
Could you give me an example of, let's say, the post that you mentioned that you see, you say, oh, I would never see that, and then you kind of go on? Like, what would be an example of something that you would see and then you just move on without giving it a second thought?
Oh, so like for instance, for a while I would see posts from other coaches and stuff like that were talking about their business, and they were like, oh my gosh, I just had a 10K month, I'm so excited. And I'm like, yeah, right, that'll never happen. I'm not gonna have a 10K month. Like, I literally had those thoughts. If somebody was like, leaving testimonials like, oh my gosh, this is what my client said about me, I'm like, mine would never say that, right? Like, and it's not that it's
right,
it's that loud. It's literally like this little whisper. But once I started paying attention to that, instead of moving on, I'd be like, wait a minute, why did I just say that about myself? Like, I could do this, I could make that, I just know that I have to do it. So it's having those conversations. But that was a huge one for me, was seeing other people grow and like having all the success. It wasn't that I hated them for what they were doing. It was an instant, like, yeah, right, you're not going to do that thought that came through.
So I actually want to dig into that a little bit more, because I feel like this is a great way to show, practically speaking, where the change in mindset can make a measurable, quantifiable difference in your business. So let's say at that moment in time, you said to yourself, but why wouldn't it happen? Or you just, instead of saying, oh, 10, 20, $30,000 a month, like, no, that's not my life, I'm going to just keep on going. Let's pretend at that moment that you stopped because you trained yourself, because you read the first chapter of Walter and Raymond's book. You trained yourself to stop and basically look at yourself in the mirror. And you stopped and you thought, but why not? Let's go through the steps that would happen if you kind of put your mindset in position to kind of internalize what you're being shown and think, well, why not me? What would be the next step for you if you thought that?
So my suggestion would be, and I always suggest writing it down. I know a lot of people don't like to write, but I suggest writing it down, right? Or you can have a conversation out loud, but it's asking yourself, well, why don't you think that? And waiting, that's the key. Wait, because your brain will give you an answer. Don't try to think of an answer, just wait, because it will come up and it'll be like, well, you aren't staying on your daily tasks. Well, am I not? Or do you just think that I'm not? Or do you think that I'm not doing enough? Right? So it's actually asking yourself a lot of questions to dig in deeper, to find out what is the core reason as to why you have that. And it may not necessarily come up the first time, right? It may be something that you just have to continue paying attention to and asking yourself that question until you get an answer. And it may be the next time that you hear something in the back of your mind that comes up, that you ask that question again, like, why do you keep going to that? Right? The difference, though, is taking that moment and being quiet, not trying to come up with an answer, just be quiet, because you will be amazed at when you ask questions, you have an immediate response. That immediate response is your subconscious giving you an answer, not the conscious mind. And that's where the difference is, because your subconscious is what is really controlling you on autopilot and you don't realize it. So by stopping and listening and taking that first answer and going with it, instead of trying to continue to figure out, no, that's not the right answer, it's got to be something else, right? Taking that first answer, that's where the process starts, at realizing there's something else to deal with.
Right. And sticking with the analogy that you gave about like say washing the dishes, or let's say if it's driving, you get to your destination because your subconscious drives. So you just know where you're going, and then you just go there, and there's nothing really getting in your way. You just take the step, and if there's traffic, you stop, you slow down. But at the end of the day, you're getting to your destination when you're not allowing your conscious to kind of make these decisions for you, right? And that's why I like the idea of letting your subconscious come to the conclusion. And so just to kind of follow the next steps, let's say that you see the post with a testimonial and you say, my client would never say that. And then you stop and you ask yourself why. And then it comes out because your subconscious tells you, because you have your own insecurities that you need to get over, and really everybody loves you. And the people that you love you, let's say, because I don't think anyone really loves anyone. So I don't think everyone loves anyone. But let's say the people that you love and the people that you care for and that you work hard for, they actually appreciate that and they recognize that. And you come to that conclusion. And then you go up to those people and you test your why up there, that maybe someone would say something positive about you. And sure enough, you say, would you mind just leaving me a testimonial? And they say, Kat, are you kidding me right now? It would be my absolute honor to leave you a testimonial. And then they do. And then you post it onto your social media page. And then somebody else sees that. And then they call you and go, I noticed what you did for, I don't know, Dylan over there. I'd love for you to kind of do that with us because we're also looking to move. And then one step leads to the next step. Also taking a look at the $30,000 a month example, you think, well, that's not me. And then you ask yourself, well, why not? And then you come to the conclusion, this crazy conclusion, that maybe you can make that happen. And because you think that, you think, well, how the hell can I make that happen? And then you think, I need to do X amount of phone calls. And then basically, after all said and done, your subconscious basically realizes, like, wait a minute, I need to start driving this ship a little bit differently. And it does. And then you become successful. So even like looking at it as I think one of the reasons that mindset is oftentimes, it's kind of like seen as like an airy fairy thing. Like it doesn't really, it's like a nice thing, like good mindset. Like you got this, write it down on a piece of paper and like, no, but like, sure. I'm not bashing any of that, but like, no, you identify where your flaws are. Your subconscious is the driver of this ship. You may as well give it a destination to go to. So you think about things and you think, why not? Or why not me? Or why is that? Why is this happening? You change course, you find a destination, your subconscious will take you there. Right? So it's not even like your mindset's like something that like, you got to be more confident, go out there and go and get like, yes, but like, no, it's so much more than that.
So much more.
It's very quantifiable as well, which is crazy powerful stuff. Right? Like if someone actually said to me the other day, like, think about the what more and don't worry so much about the how. The how will happen. It will come to you. This is why, like, if your back's against the wall and you needed, let's say, I don't know, the world was going to end unless you made $10,000 in 48 hours. Like, you'd find a way to do that.
Yep.
Because when you know exactly what needs to happen and you're so freaking laser focused on that, the how will sort itself out.
Yep.
Which is why all of these lead generation strategies are all different hows. It's like, they're very important. Don't get me wrong. But like, you get crystal clear about where your what is, and like you'll find a way to make it happen. Would you say that's a fair kind of synopsis?
I would definitely say it's a fair synopsis. And I would also say too that the other piece of that too is once you decide to let go of the how, you have to be okay with how it turns out. It may not necessarily turn out how you thought it was going to, or how you had it in your mind, because none of us can tell the future. You have to be okay with how it turns out, right? That's another thing that we tend to get stuck on. We'll have something happen, right? But we're like, yeah, but what it was supposed to be was I should have had 3%. Instead, I had to take a 0.5% to help them close, blah, blah, blah. But you closed the deal.
Right.
And you made it smooth. And now your clients are going to send other people to you because of the way that you handled it. So even though it didn't happen the way you wanted it to in your mind, it's still a win. And a lot of people forget to find that piece, is to find the win when something happens. So when that how comes and you don't completely understand it, or let's say you don't agree with it, because your mind will fight you for a while until you teach it to be different. It may say like, oh, I mean, yeah, it happened, but this is how it was supposed to. You have to be able to say, okay, but this happened and this happened and this happened, and I'm okay with that. So I'm okay with the way it happened. You have to remind yourself. And for a lot of people, and this is something that I see happen all the time, and I did for a while as well, is reminding people to acknowledge those moments. And so a lot of times when I tell someone like, give me a proud moment or tell me something you've done good for today, the first thing that most people go to is they try to think of the biggest thing, right? Yep. What about getting out of bed? Did you get out of bed when your alarm went off instead of sleeping in or hitting snooze? Congratulations. That's a win. Did you get up and make your bed and have coffee instead of rushing out the door? Congratulations. That's a win. We get so stuck on the big picture and we forget that it's the small little things that we do throughout the day that create that big picture. And so you have to remember that when you decide to let go of that how, is to accept the way that it comes to you and then find those positive moments within it. So it's a way to rewire how your brain accepts things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So it's not, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like even if it's usually a mindset problem of some sort, if someone is struggling, there is such a thing as, let's say, it could be a mindset problem, mindset gap or lacking. It could be a knowledge problem. It could be an execution problem. How can you identify when your mindset's off versus your knowledge is lacking versus your execution is misaligned? Like, how do you know what the solution to the problem is?
I would say that you don't always necessarily know the solution to the problem, and that's okay. People get stuck on trying to figure out the solution to the problem, and sometimes it's just doing it consistently. So, in my personal opinion, it still kind of comes back to mindset. So, for instance, if you're lead generating, but you're like, this is not working, are you actually being consistent in your lead generating? Are you doing it consistently every single day, or the times that you set for yourself? Are you holding yourself to that commitment? If you're not, it still comes back to a mindset thing. There is something that is holding you back, that is telling you not to go through with it for fear of something.
So is there a process to follow to then, because it seems like the strategy is really to somehow find a way for your subconscious to answer the question. And as soon as you can unlock that, then you've got the solution to the problem. Is there a method or is there a strategy to follow to unlock your subconscious and basically give it the key so that it can actually answer the question for you?
Taking time throughout every day to be present is the first step. So I had a lady that I was following online. She's a psychologist, and she had something that I thought was really, really neat. She would set random timers on her phone throughout the day. And when that timer would go off, she would stop everything that she was doing, and she would focus on her five senses for a few minutes. What do I see? What do I taste? What do I smell? What do I hear? And what can I touch? Because we get stuck on autopilot so much throughout our life. The more that you train your brain to be present, the easier it is to have that conversation and recognize when those weird sayings or the things that your subconscious are poking at you come out. When you are constantly on autopilot and you're like, oh, I got to do this, and you're constantly staying in the flow of things, you are not actually being present. You're just going with the flow of your day, or making sure you're staying busy because your brain thinks you need to be busy in order to accomplish something. And that's not necessarily true. And in order to accomplish the mind, and in order to take back how you see things, you actually have to take a break.
Awesome. That really is. Honestly, that's brilliant, and it's beautiful, and it's deep. It's almost like your subconscious is like the quiet kid in a room, like that's just standing in a corner, like saying his mind, and like, why is nobody listening to me? And then finally somebody decides, like, let's listen to what this person has to say. And then you hear it, and it's like, well, that's it. Okay, yeah. Well, thank you. Well, you're gonna speak first next time.
And everybody has to do it differently. Like, the way that it works for me doesn't necessarily work for someone else. But a lot of people are like, well, I can't go to sleep. Why can't you go to sleep? Because I have all these thoughts in my mind. Have you thought about getting up for 5 minutes and writing all the thoughts down?
Right.
Because then the brain can't keep going. It doesn't have anything else, right? That's why writing and journaling, or like for some people, talking into a voice memo just to get it out of your head, is a fantastic way for you to be able to assess yourself and then move on from there. And I had a really hard time with it in the beginning. I had coaches and mentors who were like, you just need to journal. I'm like, oh my God, I hate journaling. Dear diary. I'm like, I do not want to do that crap. But I was taught, like, no, you don't necessarily need to talk about your day. But if there's something on your mind, then write it down, and then start asking yourself the question, and then just let the pen go. And I tried it a couple times, and it was crazy. I was like, I'm going to do this for like 3 minutes, right? 3 minutes, yeah. Whatever. I'm having a problem with this. Why am I doing this? And then all of a sudden I had 4 pages and it was almost 20 minutes. And I was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
I don't remember half of the stuff that I wrote down, but I can tell you that when I was done, I was so much more at peace. Like, my brain felt like it was recharging. Right. And I was like, well, that's weird. And because I did it, and my husband was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I can't think of anything. Like, my brain is quiet. Like, that's weird. I'm not used to that.
Right.
So it's still something that I go back to and I do. And if I don't write it down, I talk to myself. talk to myself a lot. So if I'm going on walks, I'll have a conversation and I'll walk through scenarios or things that are bothering me or things I've been focusing on. The shower, I don't know why the shower is a thing for me, but certain things will pop up and I'm like, why did I say that? And I'm like, okay, well, if I think about it this way, okay, so then why were you focusing on this? Well, it's because this happened here, which then made you think, right? So it's like this, but I allow my brain to run with it instead of stopping it and being like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to focus on it. I need to get things done. I allow my brain to have that conversation with me and I'm open to it.
Right.
And so therefore, I don't get stuck on things as much. I don't get it stuck in my brain as much. And if I do, I try to write it down or have a conversation or put it in a voice memo. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to go back and listen to it or reread it. Most of the time I don't, but it at least gets it out there and I'm aware of it.
Mm-hmm. So to end it off, bring it full circle, what's one piece of advice that you would give to an agent that's, let's say, either facing a dilemma? Let's say what's one piece of advice that you would give to an agent that's facing one dilemma, looking to try to get to the next level and just isn't sure what the answer to their problem is, or the answer to what their problem is?
I would say, think about how long you've been staring at that problem and take a break from it. Sometimes taking a break from it, walking away, doing something completely different, whether that's taking a walk, whether that's meditating, whatever the case may be, go read a book, then come back to it. You assess it in a different light. And then instead of trying to figure out the entire picture, just figure out one thing. So if it is moving my business forward and I'm getting overwhelmed, great. So where can you take something off of your plate? Well, I'm tired of doing paperwork. Great. Then you need to hire a TC.
Right.
Start with a small problem. Everyone that tries to solve a dilemma or solve a problem is trying to look for the entire answer. And sometimes it works better when we pick it apart and figure out one piece, because once you put one piece together, that other puzzle piece finds itself. And then the other pieces just flow versus trying to see the entire thing.
Kat, that was so much fun. That was really awesome kind of digging into this. Before I let you go, let me ask, how can the viewers, the listeners, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find me at Agent Services Plus across all those platforms. So I'm super easy to find. Everything's simple, and you'll be seeing more from me. I actually have a podcast coming out as well that hopefully will hit the end of this week. But I look forward to connecting with everyone. And thank you so much, Oliver, for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. What's the name of your podcast?
It is called Real Chat with Kat.
Okay, there we go. Real Chat with Kat. Awesome. So guys, go check that out if you haven't yet already. If you're listening to this on the recording, then it's probably already out, right? It's coming out in, like you said, in the next week or so?
Yes. Yeah. It should be. I'm in the process of finishing some of the back end work to release it.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Oliver.